Hi, folks. Welcome to Wednesday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast. Jimmy's with us again today. Jimmy Hutton.
Right.
And Stuart Lockhead.
Hi there.
Stuart. I think today we're just going to go with PMQs, the bold Boris's PR stance being what it seems to be about these days, and the press conference, which again the BBC I think has given us in full. The PMQs, Jimmy. I think we all kind of watched the start of it and then went to the press conference. Is that about accurate?
I kind of wished I hadn't bothered, mate. It's getting a bit fair play. It was a different face, Angela Rayner, standing in for Keir Starmer today, but it's a joke. We're not getting any questions answered. Boris is just chuntering, and you've got backbench Tories it was blatant today. The backbench Tories who were slated to get questions, Boris had a wee list in his book of exactly what they were handing to those Tories constituencies, which schools were getting extra funding, which hospitals were getting extra doing that. It was ridiculous, man. I mean, they stand up there to pad it out because Lindsay Hoyle's trying to hang on to that half-hour thing. And they're basically just, they're licking his ass, mate. They're padding the thing out to make it a wee bit easier for him.
Well,
it's a joke.
As we know, he's not a details man. For him to know the names of schools, let alone schools that aren't in his constituency, makes it glaringly obvious that these are planted, pre-prepared questions to give him something to say that makes him look like he knows what a detail is. Stuart?
I was more impressed with Angela Rayner than Jimmy. She's got the right accent. She used to work on a basic pay job.
Got the right accent? What does that mean?
She's from the north of England.
That means
That's she didn't. Classist, isn't it?
That means she didn't go eating.
Something like that. I mean, look at Keir Starmer. I mean, you can't fault him on his posh accent. Where did it go wrong? Right at the start. Apparently, yesterday was a celebration of the Battle of Britain. Somebody tried to celebrate it by a question, but they got it wrong. So Angela Rayner said, "Well, we're celebrating." What did she end up saying? We were celebrating. Simplifying. God knows. Anyway, it was
excuse me. Yesterday's celebration was 80 years since the day deemed to be the turning point in the Battle of Britain.
Oh, God, I didn't even want to know about that. It was the other thing that Angela Rayner asked. Never mind. But anyway, Angela Rayner brought it up for them. Then she asked a very difficult question because the First Minister has been known to earn £2,300 an hour. So she simply asked, what's the rate of a care worker, the average rate of a care worker? Right, well, he didn't even try to answer. He started...
Well, neither he should. That's just the cheap shite that Labour and the Tories have been coming up with for years. Do you know the price of a pint of milk? It's a wasted time, and it's an insult to the intelligence of anybody watching that a Labour deputy leader would come out with that.
Jimmy, I enjoyed it anyway. And then, of course, he made no effort to answer it. He didn't even say, well, that was a cheap shot. He should have said what you just said, Jimmy. So there you go. But he waffled, and then he launched into an answer about care homes that he wasn't asked about. So I was like, oh, God, more of that.
That was a bit surreal.
It was the same as last week. He stats that he wanted to tell us about, even though he wasn't asked about them.
I mean, his first two answers there, he talked about a winter care home action plan that they were announcing today. Then in the second answer, they said they were announcing it tomorrow. So when are we going to get it? Does it apply only to England? Does it apply to England and Wales, or are we included too? Who knows?
I've got a sneaky feeling that what we're going to get from this government is plans for England that will be forced on Scotland. Scotland won't be part of the equation. They'll have plans for their constituency, which is
That's all right, because every single thing that they've planned so far this year, they've had to U-turn on it, spin around in it, come up with a new plan. So whatever they've got, Ken Watt, give us a shout in 3 months when you've worked out what you're actually going to do, and by that time we'll have done something better.
Aye.
So we heard that he got blamed he's blamed the people again, which is just what he's always would. So big surprise there. I'm not sure what anything else was worth listening to.
Having thanked the people, he then blamed them. Jimmy?
Well, Angela Rayner had an interesting figure saying that they were averaging 62,000 tests a day. Out of their 350 capacity, actual tests done and results given back to people within the 24-hour timeline. She was saying they're averaging 262, which seems ludicrous. Now, he claimed that it was 210 last week and 240 this week. So it'd be interesting for somebody to go and have a rummage about the figures and see what's actually true.
Jimmy, I'm pretty sure last week's figure was rubbish by somebody, but straight away it wasn't like the 240.
Well, there's no danger he's getting 240,000 tests done, mate, because Matt Hancock only said yesterday, basically, where labs are James hunted, give us a few weeks and we'll see if we can do a bit better. So there's no danger they're getting over 200,000 tests done a day.
I can recommend John Crace in The Guardian for his portrait of Matt Hancock. Yeah, funny, prepared to laugh.
I think, well, I can understand why they want Sturgeon off the telly. Because you watch, I watched 20 minutes of PMQs and then went over to Sturgeon, who answered questions from the press. And gave us information. Ian Blackford today at PMQs.
I didn't wait for him.
He had the right idea, mate. Then he made a James Hunt of it. He had the right idea by pointing out, basically naming Clause 46 of the Internal Markets Bill as the bypass Holyrood clause. But then he didn't stick to it. He started on burbling again about how Boris is this, that, and the next thing. We ken what Boris is. We didn't need you to tell us every week, fat man. Just get touring about him. And if you can't get touring about him, step aside for somebody that can.
I agree with you, Jimmy. I've been saying that for a long time.
And Ian Blackford made an error today when he criticised Boris. He criticised the Tories for attacking the union through the bill. And Boris had the opportunity to turn around and say, "Oh, you're now a union supporter, are you?"
Right. I think Ian's just about had his time, mate. He's too prone to, too prone to being friendly with these people. I wouldn't sit and laugh and giggle with Boris after I'd made a James Hunt of myself and stand and walk out.
Well, I think I've made the point before. I think he's too verbose. I think what he needs to do is come up with 3 good headline grabbers and just bang, bang, bang.
Well, I think today we got to see Boris doing his Trump impression. You know, the bumbling idiot who occasionally has a mild grasp of what might have been going on a couple of weeks ago, but didn't ask him about anything that's going on now. So frankly, I think Boris is playing that part particularly well at the moment. They've realised how well it works for Donald. So
yesterday there was a wee spat on social media about whether Boris had played up or played down just how bad or easy a time he had with COVID when he was ill. They were batting about, so I don't know. Does it matter?
No, it doesn't matter.
I didn't think so.
It doesn't matter. It gave him a wee bump in the polls when he got ill, but it certainly doesn't matter to what's happening now. I mean, it's a complete guddle just now. I mean, I'm prepared to allow them some leeway on the fact, in comparison to Scotland, where they're dealing with, 12 times as many people. Well, 10 times as many people. And obviously the size of their task makes it more difficult. So
but remember,
I'm prepared to give them some leeway, but
they're using 20 times the budget of what they're given to Scotland to deal with 12 times the people, and they're making a pig's lug of it.
Aye, well,
mostly because they've siphoned off a section of that budget and decided that that's going into the pockets of their friends, and via their friends go back into their own pockets at some point. But
you know, the
testing thing has been, they've been getting warned about testing since June, since Boris told them they'd have a world-leading operation, and everybody told them that he had no chance of doing that.
Well, Nick Farrar on LBC had a guy phone in, and I think he was trying to goad him. This is from Twitter. I didn't actually hear this. And Nick Farrar said to him, well, what did you do? You went private for your test. In other words, why are you criticising them? And the guy turned around and said, went private. All testing's private. It's just Serco hiding behind an NHS badge.
Mm-hmm.
You know, which, and they all say the same thing. Our NHS testing and tracing, testing, etc., etc. They always put NHS in front of it, almost as if they're trying to protect Serco.
Well, I didn't realise that was happening. But I mean, that's not happening in Scotland, is it? We'd have heard, surely.
No, we've still got the two pillars. We've still got the NHS testing in their own labs in Scotland. I mean, the Lighthouse lab testing.
All right. Just rewind a moment there to what Jimmy's just said about, you know, the money going to their pals and then coming back in again. Let's be honest, we've been saying this sort of thing for donkey's years, but it's so true now. It's on a different scale now. It's absolutely blatant now. People used to resign when they got splashed in the papers about it. Not anymore.
They're not even bothering to hide it.
But in fact, it's worse than that. The suggestion, in fact, by Richard Murphy today was, without me saying what he's talking about, is that they're deliberately lying in public because they know they can get away with it, and it works to cow the people. Because, you know, these boys are lying, but there's nothing we can do about it, so we better shut up.
Used to be it took you an entire career in politics if you wanted to trouser generational wealth. You know, if you wanted to change your family, your entire family's prospects, it took you an entire career.
Oh, no, unless you went to India. Then
these buggers are doing it in a couple of years.
I was going to say,
they've filched billions out of the public purse.
Well, that's another argument, of course, for that they're not going to stay. They don't believe that things will work, that things could go wrong very quickly, especially next spring, and they're trousering in the money as quickly as possible before they get out.
Quite possible. I wonder how much it's going through some of these strange little crown dependencies and such.
Well, I'll not be going through Bermuda.
Aye, that's a stand.
Barbados.
Congratulations,
Barbados.
Bermuda.
Sorry, Barbados. Yeah.
Apparently, they're getting rid of the Queen.
Yeah, becoming a republic. Maybe they're not getting enough money.
I hope they didn't grow bananas over there, because we're going to get some terrible stories for the Sun and that if they do.
Barbados isn't what do you call it, an offshore haven, is it?
Not a famous one.
There's some weird banking stuff goes on in Barbados. Aye.
Well, we've got closer to home. We've got the City of London, the Isle of Man, Jersey, Guernsey, Malta, Cyprus, Cayman Islands, Virgin Islands. Anywhere else I've missed out?
Yep. When it comes to dodgy companies, you've got Scotland as well.
Yeah, they set up a system which is not in the control of any Scottish government, but we have a LLPs or something like that, some kind of company status.
The press conference, guys, anything?
Yes, look, I've got to link the two because, to be honest, the issue of testing, it's given the First Minister a lot. It's given her grief on two levels. Obviously, it's given her grief because the lack of testing means that the test to protect system doesn't work properly. But it's also given her grief politically. She is desperate not to turn around and criticise the UK government. She can't do, especially on this press briefing, what Angela Rayner did and blame the Prime Minister and the Tory government for everything that's going wrong. She's desperate not to do that for, I would imagine, political reasons, because she'd get totally savage by the press.
She can tomorrow.
Where tomorrow?
First Minister's questions.
Aye, you can guarantee that testing won't come up for Bruce Davidson tomorrow, I would imagine.
That's a good point. I'll look out for that tomorrow. But you could tell when she was asked about it, and especially I stayed until not obviously until we started. Who was it? The Express guy, the new man from the Express, and you know how awful they print lies. As she said herself, doesn't matter what I say, you'll print what you like. She totally scalped him, and the guy's name is Sam Stevenson. For everybody listening, watch out for him. We'll see what he writes tomorrow. All I can say is I did see her. She struggles with what she says in this briefing about testing.
Well, effectively, it's reporting by omission at the moment. Nobody's saying that she's in constructive talks with the UK government about the UK testing regime. They're all saying the same thing. She is criticising the UK government. She is exasperated, I think I saw somewhere, by the UK government. None of which she said at these briefings.
Well, look,
I mean, today she said, oh, it's beginning to get sorted out.
Look, apparently a guy called Ian Stewart, who's a Scottish office minister with a Scottish accent, but lives in England and has got an English...
He's an English MP, but a Scotsman.
Apparently, he said that the testing has increased hugely in Scotland, and that he criticised the First Minister, apparently. So we'll have to look that one up.
For what? For increasing testing?
We're complaining about the testing.
That's what I mean. She's not complaining about the testing.
Well,
she's complaining about a glitch in the testing.
Look it up yourself. But apparently, this was the story from the Express man. A Tory.
This was on Good Morning Scotland.
Criticised the First Minister about testing, as if she.
Well, elsewhere it's been called a car crash interview. I didn't think Ian Stewart comes out of it very, very well. He tried to talk about points being put to him as propaganda, and it was hardly propaganda when it's coming from a professor at Edinburgh University.
Would you like to hear it?
Oh, wow.
Aye, charge on, mate.
Excellent.
Here we go. This is Ian Stewart on Good Morning Scotland.
Is there work ongoing to improve relations between central and devolved administrations, given that as a Scotland Office Minister you voted through the Internal Market Bill, which is widely seen as recentralising powers to London?
Well, firstly, the UK Internal Market Bill is not about recentralising powers. It increases devolution. It increases the devolved settlement in Scotland
Market
and across
access
the UK.
rules would mean that laws brought in England would have to be introduced right across the UK and the devolved administrations, even if they didn't want those introduced.
This is manufactured grievance from the separatists. They don't like it.
It is not manufactured grievance from the separatists. I'm reading from a piece that's been written by Professor Nicola McEwen of the Centre for Constitutional Change at Edinburgh University.
This bill increases the powers of the Scottish Parliament. It protects Scottish businesses, their ability to trade unfettered throughout the whole United Kingdom. What Mike Russell was referring to...
So if the Scottish Parliament wanted to introduce a law to, for instance, to tackle measures designed to tackle obesity, to reduce the amount of sugar content in food and put that on the labels, and that didn't suit producers in England, they could introduce it here, but we'd still have all the produce being sent to us from England.
No,
and that's an example that I'm using from this paper, from an academic, not a politician.
We have heard all sorts of scare stories that, for example, the Scottish Government wouldn't be able to introduce minimum unit pricing for alcohol. That is not the case. This bill strengthens the devolution settlement, and what Mike Russell was trying to do yesterday was manufacture just agreements. They don't want devolution to work. They don't want Scotland's place in the United Kingdom to be strengthened.
You're talking about Michael Russell, who's, of course, the Constitution Secretary at the Scottish Parliament.
You asked me at the outset, what my relations are. I've perfectly cordial relations with the Scottish Government. I've got responsibility, for example, for welfare powers in Scotland.
Not doing too well, is he?
Well, he didn't answer the question.
No.
Effectively.
Well, All they've got is their lines, Norrie. This
Aye.
bill strengthens devolution. This is a devolutionary bill that gives more powers to Scotland. All they've got is to assert those lines. When you get behind those lines and ask them about detail, they don't have any, because none of them have an understanding of what's in the bill. And if you really push them, they'd have to phone Dominic Cummings and ask for another line, because he's only gave them 4 or 5.
I read an article this morning that basically has suggested that the throwing away of our responsibilities for international law is a cover for the dismantling of devolution. The suggestion was that the government will U-turn
on that part of it.
And everybody will have a big sigh of relief and just simply forget about Section 46, which strips the devolved governments of power.
Can I just make it clear to the viewers and listeners? This bill strips all powers from the devolved administrations, because it allows a Secretary of State in London to overrule anything that they do in the devolved administration.
Norrie, it's what you've been saying for 18 months. They didn't need to shut Holyrood if they can just pull its teeth. That's what the bill does. And I would not be at all surprised if they've already got the carve up set in stone, or Jack McConnell or some Labourite in the House of Lords can take some credit for getting the Tories to U-turn on the international law thing.
And I am fed up listening to people tell me that this new Queen Elizabeth House that they built, room for 3,000 staff in the middle of Edinburgh, is not going to be used. I'm sorry, it's going to be used. Just hand out money.
Saying it's going to be used. What I'm saying is it's not the bloody Viceroy's office. People going about these 3,000 jobs as if they're new. They're moving staff from existing offices into them. People are making out that this is going to be some 3,000 new civil servants sent up to London to run Scotland because the Scottish civil service can't be trusted. That's not happening.
I didn't say that. What I do know is they've got a cabinet room there to have meetings in. And
every new office is going to have a big room, Stuart. Come on.
And they are planning, to hand money directly. They're going to spend money and bypass the devolved administrations across 3 devolved: Northern Ireland, Wales.
Put your clicky pen down.
Good man. Thank
you. I don't think you go far enough there, Stuart. It's not going to be Scotland's Viceroy alone. It's going to be any minister. It's going to be any minister is going to be able to change, circumvent Scottish law.
So what did the Scottish Parliament do with this?
Now,
obviously they're not going to give it consent. There will not be a consent motion. So when this gets rammed through, it'll probably get a third reading. If they can get it through the House of Lords, what do we do?
What we do right now is we put through Parliament, the Scottish Parliament, ways to protect what we want to protect. I.e., we put a bill through Parliament saying, nay chlorinated chicken.
Oh, go away.
Wait, Stuart, wait a minute. I'm not saying this has to be a useful bill. It's a signpost. We put through Parliament, nay chlorinated chicken, or no GR crops, or whatever it needs to be. Because until this comes into force, laws in Scotland can't be interfered with.
Right, but it's only a matter of time. It's just a delaying tactic. It's not going to stop anything, is it?
Can they do it retrospectively? Not according to the bill.
Not according to the bill as published.
Exactly. So that forces them to either change the bill and make plain what their plans are, or we get one over them.
I thought they were already plain. If you want to look, we know what's.
No, I'm talking about it forces the Tories to actually admit that what they're trying to do is interfere with devolution, instead of simply saying, well, if they take an action that changes a law that's in force in Scotland, that proves that what they're trying to do is change Scottish law, which they're claiming they're not trying to do.
Yeah, but it'll be too late. They'll have done so anyway. What power have we got?
Well, if we pass the law now, they have to do it retrospectively.
Well, they've done that before.
Yeah, and that makes it plain. And that gives us more ammunition for the next independence referendum. That's all I'm saying.
I'm worried I'm worried if we'll ever get to next May's Holyrood election with anything like the kind of probity that we normally expect at a Holyrood election.
I don't think they have to, well, I mean, Jimmy made the point earlier. I don't think that the elections for Holyrood are going to be relevant to this in any way, because by the time they get this through, Holyrood, it doesn't matter what Holyrood votes for, they can override anything.
It'll be like the parish council that Tony Blair always said it was.
And it ceases to be a thorn in their side, because they can basically say anything will affect the market. It doesn't have to be something that will affect the market. They can simply claim it will.
I'm interested why nobody's arguing the fact. Why do Scottish companies need any legislation to guarantee unfettered access to the UK internal market?
Exactly.
There's no legislation that guarantees that now. Who's threatening to not allow Scottish companies access to the UK internal market?
Right.
Is this just a 21st century way of dressing up the Alien Act of 1705 again?
No, what this is, if you think of it this way, if Scotland's animal welfare standards are higher than England's, right? So if Scotland's haggis is looked after better than England's haggis, we'll still be able to sell into England.
Mm-hmm.
But England's haggis won't be able to be sold in Scotland because it won't meet our welfare standards.
Well, they can stick their haggis up their garry then. If they're not going to look after their haggis in a fair and decent manner, then frankly, I'll go down and liberate their haggis. How many haggis can I fit in a taxi?
That's the ridiculous side of their argument. But where it's really important is in international trade deals. If they can't sell Scotland's NHS to the Americans, the Americans might not want a trade deal.
Yeah, but that's fair. But Jimmy's making a very good point, and I'm fed up not hearing prominent politicians in Scotland making that case. Why do we need a law when we're already trading on the?
It shouldn't be left
about now.
Shouldn't be left to Mike Russell.
But that's their excuse. That's their excuse. And why doesn't we hear a prominent politician responding to that? We don't hear it.
Well, I'm sorry, Mike Russell has responded to it. Ian Blackford has responded to it. They have both said this is about lowering standards.
No, I know. I want them to say this is totally unnecessary because you can already trade across the UK.
I think it's getting to the point where, forget Blackford, I think it's getting to the point where somebody just needs to stand up in Westminster and say, this is a crock of shit. This is a nonsense. This is an all-out assault on devolution. And if you think that you're going to be able to push this upon us, think again. Scotland will walk away. I didn't care. Threaten them with whatever. I mean, I'll go down and back into Boris, flatten the fat git. Something's got to give here. This is what, Norrie, you've been warning about for months. Months and months you've said they didn't need to shut Holyrood. They just need to take the powers away. And this clearly, blatantly does that. And we are seeing none of the Scottish media reporting that as such, because it is not in their interest. The Scottish media are 100% unionist. 100%. Even in National is owned by unionists. So it's not in their interest to point out to the people of Scotland. So your average Joe doesn't know that this is the end of devolution. They actually think this internal market bill is some crap about business. And business doesn't really matter too much to them as long as they can get on with their own life. So they just switch off. Hence the reason they gave it such a asinine name as the UK Internal Market Bill.
I know. Well done, Jimmy. I'm 100% with you.
Well, I haven't disagreed. As I say, it's about the future, not the present.
They talk about the detail, and you forget the details. It's exactly what Jimmy has talked about over the last 5 minutes.
As I said, I don't know who's going to come forward and fight this. Mike Russell's he makes great points, but he's got no cut through with the media. And Ian Blackford's just Ian Blackford.
I think they're going to have to.
I think we need one of the young guns, or we need one of the brilliant minds to step forward and absolutely eviscerate this.
Well, the only person that said anything solid was Joe Cherry the other day.
Yeah, but they're not going to get a platform. They're going to have to walk out. If this passes, they need to walk out. We can reconvene in a big building in Edinburgh and invite the Tories and the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats to join them.
I mean, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at you, Norrie, and right behind you, those headlines. Attack on devolution has begun. Westminster launches assault on Holyrood. That is not actually saying what's happened. I mean, that is just sort of like, we're about to paint the town red, but we'll just call it pink at the moment.
I think
it's an attack on devolution.
Aye, but
it's not begun. It's really, this is it. This is the end.
This is their end game. This is their way of making sure that it doesn't matter if Holyrood's powerless, then it doesn't matter. Holyrood can sit all day, every day, and call for a referendum. If they think they've neutralised Holyrood, they'll say, Barry, on you go. Ken, what? You can be on BBC Scotland all day long if you want, because nobody's going to listen to you.
Well, I mean, I do think that if this actually gets through the Lords, which is the only place that will stop it.
Of course it will. They'll just put it through again and again.
Section 46 in place. I think they have to seriously consider boycotting Westminster. And
you have to remember.
And I mean boycotting everything from Westminster as well. So if the Westminster English Parliament starts passing laws that go against what the Scottish Parliament has passed, we ignore Westminster.
Yeah, then you have a fight with the civil servants. And
yeah, you're going to have a fight with the civil servants. So that's what you do. You fight the civil servants. If they're not prepared to stand by agreements made within the UK, between the countries of the UK, we're not obliged to stand by them either.
Yes. I would agree with that and say, by the way, that Parliament doesn't make our decisions for us. We chose to have a Holyrood Parliament. You can't legislate that away because you can't win seats in it and you didn't like what it says.
We are stuck with needing international support. I mean, if we were Irish, we'd have huge American support.
Well, apparently Ian Blackford's been having meetings with the EU. Who knows where that's gone?
Who knows where that goes? Look how big support they gave Catalonia. Huh?
The other interesting thing about this, I think, is this is the reason that the Tories never wanted an English Parliament. Because they can claim this is a UK Parliament.
Aye.
When they start passing laws that override laws in Scotland, it will become very apparent that Westminster is an English Parliament because it will be English laws.
Aye, they'll only get 6 votes. They'll get their 6 Tories that they've got now. And Ian Murray will not in all... Well, maybe he'll just stay down there, eh? I was going to say he'll not be able to vote for some of the stuff they're going to pass and still call himself Labour.
You think what they might pass that will be under the banner of evil, English votes for English laws. They can pass legislation using evil about education, for instance, which is devolved and Scotland has no right to vote on it now.
Aye, suddenly
that
we could
law
get academy schools.
Can then be used to alter Scottish law. Now, I don't know if they've thought this far down the road. I don't know if they've thought about this far enough down the road. The minute that happens, that's English rule over Scots. that ceases to be an equal partnership. If we're not entitled to a vote on something at Westminster, and that then becomes English law and is taken up by their Committee of Market Equality or whatever they're going to call it, and it forces a change in Scottish law, that is English dominion over Scotland.
I think we've got to accept that we're living in the age of English dominion. We always have since 1707, regardless of how they dress it up.
But Jimmy, until evil, they could always claim we had the same vote as they had. Now they've got evil in place, there are votes we're not allowed to have a part in. And if they get passed and it's to the detriment of Scottish law, that is English dominion over Scotland.
Will there be a Scottish law?
Well, that becomes a West Lothian question turned on its head. It becomes the East Sussex question.
Why don't they just abolish Scottish law? Why don't they just abolish Scotland?
Wouldn't they love to?
Into England?
Wouldn't they love to? But nobody's thought about that aspect of it. As I say, it turns the West Lothian question right on its head.
I think, to be honest, mate, I think they will desperately try and push this through, but it's time for people to stand up. It's time for people to realise what's going on. And frankly, it's time for the SNP to point out to people exactly what's going on. Saying this is an attack on Holyrood isn't enough. Get on the news and show exactly how it's an attack on Holyrood, exactly what they intend to do.
Well, I've just given them the weapon.
Which one is that?
Because of evil, there will be decisions made, legal decisions made at Westminster that only affect English law, that can then be used by this Committee of the Internal Market to overturn Scots law, at which point Scotland will not have had a vote. Our MPs at Westminster will have been kept out of the vote because of evil, and English law will dominate Scotland. That becomes English domination of Scotland because we didn't get a vote. So any aspect of law changes that are covered by evil is only English votes. If the law changes are then used to change something because of the internal market, Scotland hasn't had a vote. It's no longer a democracy. It's dictation by England to Scotland.
I wonder if there's a fancy legal phrase for the term "stick that right up your hoop."
I haven't heard that particular aspect of it mentioned once.
I mean, look, ever since 2007, when the SNP first came to power in Holyrood, and even more so 2011 when SNP got a majority in Holyrood, this was never meant to happen. The Unionists designed Holyrood. Holyrood was meant to stop Scottish independence. Now, ever since 2011, they've been that's 9 years ago, they've been working to emasculate Holyrood.
Yeah, well, they've tried to build in the traps, and the traps haven't quite worked as well as they thought.
Well, the tax and welfare devolved powers have just been a trap. The welfare powers haven't been used because they're too complicated. The tax one they didn't use because, again, it's a trap.
Be interesting to see how they use this bit of legislation to screw with what Scotland does with the welfare powers it has.
Well, they haven't. £10 a week for a child and £20 a month for somewhere else. That's all they've brought in so far. They can't. They've had to delay.
Oh no! One of the big differences, Stuart, is the medical overview of disabled people's claims. That's going to be a massive change. I mean, all those people we know who have had to apply 3 and 4 times for benefits that they should have automatically. That's going to be a big change.
Well, when's that happening?
It comes in, it's either coming or it comes in shortly.
I mean, at the moment, the application of the powers that Shirley Ann Somerville is responsible for have been delayed for years.
Yeah.
From last year to, and it's still not coming in because they're not ready to cope, apparently. I mean, why they're not ready to cope could be because of civil servants in England. I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that they have not been as cooperative as we would have liked them to have been. Because
what they were cooperate in something that then shows them up to be trash when we put in a system that works far better than what they've managed to turn the welfare system into in this country.
Well, what they were hoping for was the situation that they had with the tax powers, where the Scottish government was, in fact, having to pay the civil service in England to deal with it.
Well, that's kind of the situation at the moment, isn't it?
And that's why the Scottish government have delayed it until they've got one of the reasons.
The accusation now has been from some of the unionists, Tory unionists, is that the Scottish administration can't cope.
Well, as I say, what they wanted was to make it so complicated and difficult to do that the Scottish government would have to pay English civil servants out of their budget to run a Scottish system, which would allow them to do two things: undermine the Scottish budget and claim Scotland wasn't capable of doing it themselves.
Wow, London making things difficult for everybody else. There's a surprise, eh?
Well, I think it's time we started making things difficult for London.
Aye, you're not wrong.
Anything else, guys, that caught your
Can we laugh at Donald?
Oh, that's cruel.
Oh, what's he done now?
He was doing a one-on-one interview last night about COVID with somebody, and I've only seen it the once, but it is joyous to watch. If you need to find it, guys, just type into the Google search bar herd mentality, because Donald said that herd mentality would sort things out. I believe he was trying to talk about herd immunity, but got himself a bit confused because the words sound, well, the ending "eh." So,
well, he'll be sitting in all these meetings talking about the MAGA cult, and they'll be talking about herd mentality, getting his topics mixed up. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm. It was the gift that keeps on giving. Unfortunately, he's cost many lives with his idiocy, and he'll cost many more before the Yanks finally get rid of him.
It was actually a Democratic hit ad. But it's part of. I'll see if I can find it and send it to you, Stuart.
Okay.
Well, is that us for the day, chaps?
I think so.
Well, thanks, Stuart Lockhead, Jimmy Hutton.
Video.
I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch you tomorrow for First Minister's Questions tomorrow, where she might be let off the leash to tell us more about the cock-up in the British testing system.
I hope so.
Cheers for now.